In 2002, an article came out in a Russian newspaper about a mysterious artifact referred to as the 8-million-year-old lady. The article was written by a journalist named Oleg Kolishkin, who said he'd struck up a conversation with a former KGB officer. And this former KGB had told the journalist a sensational story about an incredible archaeological find and the government's attempts to cover it up. A story that, if true, would completely rewrite everything we knew about the history of humanity. It was September 5th, 1969, in the village of Ryazhchik, Russia. Alexander Masalagin, the head of a local mining operation, was busy at work when he received news from one of his miners. The men had been working away about 70 meters underground when suddenly their pickaxes hit something. Whatever this thing was, it stood out from the rock surrounding it. The men chipped their way around it, eventually revealing what looked to be a large, solid object. It was hard to tell what it was made of. It looked like a mix of marble and crystal. There were no joints or seams, just a smooth, solid piece, which was strange because whatever this thing was, it did not look like a natural formation. It looked a lot like a sarcophagus. When Masalagin heard about this, he was thrilled. This was a coal mine, and seeing the significance of this find, he quickly informed local authorities. The excitement soon turned to concern, though. The miners were worried that the artifact was going to be seized and that they'd be left without any reward. But what could they do, right? They weren't going to get anything just leaving the thing there and not telling anyone. It had to be brought to the surface. As the miners worked to excavate the sarcophagus, they couldn't help but wonder what could be inside it. I mean, sure, most likely it was going to be human remains, but if this person had been rich and important, maybe there'd be treasure along with them. Gold, precious jewels, who knew? Maybe they could take some of it before the authorities arrived. Well, what they found was much more shocking. First of all, the casket was hermetically sealed. It seemed to have this vacuum-like effect when it opened up. This was a pretty sophisticated preservation method. And inside lay the body of a young woman. Not the bones, but an eerily well-preserved body, surrounded in some sort of pink liquid. She looked to be around 25 to 30 years old. She was beautiful, dark brown hair down to her waist. She was dressed in a white lace gown embroidered with flowers. There was also intricate jewelry adorning her body, bracelets, rings, and a tiara, all made of what looked like precious metals and gemstones. Some accounts even say that her eyes were open and that they were a deep blue. There were also strange symbols and inscriptions on the jewelry, written in an unknown language. Also inside was a small black metal box. The men just couldn't believe what they were looking at, and as they all stood there dumbfounded, one worker dipped his finger into the liquid and apparently was warm to the touch, and began to react when exposed to air, changing color from pinkish to bluish. Soon after the princess was unearthed, men in gray protective suits arrived at the scene, claiming the discovery was contagious. One story goes that the worker who dipped his finger in the liquid began experiencing severe mental decline in the weeks that followed, eventually freezing in the cold right outside of his home one night. It looked like he'd wandered outside and for some reason couldn't get back in. News about the discovery had spread amongst locals and a crowd had gathered, and the villagers watched as authorities transported the strange artifact away via helicopter. Following the discovery of what would go on to be dubbed the Tisul Princess, a scientist from Novosibirsk examined the remains, and he came to a pretty outlandish conclusion. According to him, this woman had died a very long time ago. I mean, hundreds of millions of years ago. He also said that the pink liquid surrounding her was a complete mystery, and even her clothing was strange. He couldn't tell what the material was, but it had a silvery sheen that almost seemed to glow, and even weirder, there were no seams or stitches visible. It looked like it had been woven using some unknown technique. All of this was very strange, but there wasn't much media coverage at the time. Just one brief article in a local newspaper. The excitement seemed to die down amongst the locals, and things soon went back to normal. That is until men in gray suits started showing up in Ryazhchik again. They started searching local buildings and homes, confiscating all copies of the newspaper that featured the article on the Tisul Princess. When people asked what they were there for or what was going on, the mysterious men adamantly denied any existence of the princess. It was clear they were trying to erase all records of her. The scientist who examined the remains and the editor of the newspaper also got in big trouble for disclosing information about the find, and people began to drop. The miners and the people who claimed they were part of the crowd the day the mysterious casket was taken away. So was the strange pink liquid actually toxic, or did the government have something to do with it? Now, to try and answer that question, we gotta ask why the government would want to keep a find like this secret. What would a discovery like this really mean? Well, now we get into the fun part. With a story as wild as this, it's really no surprise that the Tisul Princess has made for some pretty fun ideas as to her origin. Ever since this story resurfaced in 2002, people have come up with some pretty crazy ideas. Some think she might have come from an ancient advanced civilization, or that she may have come from a different planet altogether. This is thanks again to the stuff I mentioned earlier, the mysterious liquid, the fact that her sarcophagus seemed to have been built in this advanced way, the mystery about her clothing and the symbols on her jewelry. As stories kept spreading though, the government kept denying her existence, and many people, including other scientists, found the whole thing very hard to believe. The idea that this woman could have lived over 800 million years ago, way before dinosaurs roamed the earth, just seemed utterly insane. But back in time again, a few years after the initial discovery, a whole bunch of specialists and workers showed up at the site again, supposedly hunting for more artifacts. They didn't tell anyone that, but military barriers were set up to keep curious locals away, which of course only made people more suspicious about what was going on. And one story goes that a few soldiers, feeling a bit too relaxed at a local pub one night, accidentally let some stuff slip. According to the men, 3 more sarcophagi had been found. Who the hell were these people? Where did they come from? Were they really buried millions of years ago? How could their bodies be so perfectly preserved, looking as if they were just asleep? Well, some started pointing at historical references about a young woman thought to be the daughter of Cicero, a famous Roman statesman. She too was discovered in a sarcophagus encased in a transparent liquid that kept her body intact for centuries. Scientists tried to analyze this liquid, but no luck. Meanwhile, the government kept trying to control the narrative, but the tighter they clamped down, the more curious people got. And there are even crazier theories about the Tisul Princess. One is that she could have been displaced in time due to a rift or an anomaly, ending up millions of years in the past. The advanced preservation methods and materials might not have been alien technology or that of an advanced ancient civilization, but from the future. Maybe time travel experiments resulted in a handful of people being stranded in different eras across different parts of the planet, with the Tisul Princess and her 2 friends being some of these lost travelers. And I know you're probably very curious, probably wanting a satisfying end to the story, but unfortunately we don't really have any closure. Could we have known more if the government had been more open about it? Does someone really have the answers and are just trying to keep them hidden? Well, it's possible. It's also possible that this never happened, or a discovery was made but has been embellished over the years, turning into a full-blown urban legend. First of all, the idea of a human existing millions of years ago really does conflict with the scientific understanding of human evolution. Fossil records in evolutionary biology place the emergence of modern humans around 200,000 years ago. Just a slight difference in time there, and there's no physical evidence of these sarcophagi. Some people claim they've seen them, but don't have any solid proof. And while we could say that this is all thanks to the Russian government's attempts at covering the whole thing up, I mean, why would a discovery like this be kept under wraps anyway? Well, for the sake of ending things on a more interesting note, let's get back to that. The Russian authorities may have wanted to suppress a discovery that could fundamentally alter our understanding of history, science, or human origins to maintain some sort of social order and control. The Soviet government could have also confiscated the sarcophagus to study and reverse engineer the advanced technology to gain the upper hand in the Cold War. This was 1969 after all. But what do I think? Well, I think it's a very fascinating story. Is there any truth to it though? Well, maybe. A lot of people get this one confused with the Siberian ice maiden, a very well documented discovery of a mummy in the Siberian mountains in 1993. She was discovered by a Russian archaeologist named Natalia Polosmark in a tomb in the Ukok Plateau. She was believed to date back around 500 BCE, making her approximately 2,500 years old. She was found in a wooden sarcophagus covered with felt blankets and a cowhide rug, and she was dressed in intricately woven garments made of wool and felt, adorned with jewelry, earrings, and necklace, and various ornaments made of gold and other precious metals. It was likely she held a high social status in her community. Her burial seemed to have been part of a complex ritual, which led the archaeologists to believe she could have been a priestess or a noblewoman. So, lots of similar elements to this story here. What do you all think? Let us know down in the comments. And with that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.